The dry Texas dust, fine as flour, clung to the uniforms of Italian prisoners of war, thousands of miles from the damp, ancient stone of their homeland. Speaking of homelands, tell us in the comments below, where are you watching from right now? It was early 1943 at Camp Swift, outside Bastrop, Texas, a place where the sun beat down relentlessly, baking the earth into a hard, cracked shell. Here, captured enemies faced a profound paradox. They were about to encounter a captivity that, for many, would offer a strange, unsettling comfort. They had arrived with a mixture of resentment and resignation, their expectations shaped by the harsh rhetoric of wartime propaganda. Yet, when presented with the quintessential American staple, a hamburger, some openly scoffed. Their laughter, a brief, sharp sound in the mess hall, echoed briefly across the wooden tables as they muttered preferences for pasta. The memory of rich Italian sauces, a stark contrast to the unfamiliar patty. But then came the first, tentative bite, and everything shifted. Among these men was Private Giancarlo Rossi, a Tuscan farmer conscripted into an infantry unit, whose calloused fingers now clutched a small, crudely carved wooden Madonna. His silent anchor to a life of olive groves and ancient traditions. His motivation was simple: survive with dignity and somehow return home. Overseeing the camp was Captain Elias Vance, the camp adjutant, a man whose meticulously kept, leather-bound ledger reflected his unwavering drive to maintain order and adhere strictly to the Geneva Convention. His daily challenge was balancing military protocol with the sheer logistical and humanitarian demands of managing thousands of men, especially when local resources were stretched thin. So how could men who openly scoffed at their captors' food find an unsettling comfort, even a peculiar prosperity, within the very walls of their enemy's territory? And what larger, unseen forces were at play that transformed this initial disdain into something far more complex? Blurring the lines between enemy and human, between propaganda and unexpected reality. The dry Texas dust, fine as flour, clung to the uniforms of the Italian prisoners of war, a stark contrast to the damp, ancient stone of their homeland. It was early 1943, and at Camp Swift, outside Bastrop, these men, thousands of miles from the front lines, faced a peculiar reality. They had arrived with a mix of resentment and the heavy weight of defeat, their expectations of captivity shaped by grim wartime propaganda. Yet within the barbed wire fences, an unsettling comfort began to take root, subtly challenging everything they thought they knew. Among them was Private Giancarlo Rossi, a Tuscan farmer whose hands, usually tending olive groves, now fidgeted with a small, crudely carved wooden Madonna. This tiny figure, smooth from countless touches, was his anchor. Giancarlo's dilemma was profound: how to reconcile the relatively abundant food and stable shelter of Camp Swift with the devastating letters from home, describing a crumbling Italy, a land ravaged by conflict. The irony was a bitter taste, far more complex than the initial, surprising flavor of an American hamburger. The U.S. War Department, in what seemed like a counterintuitive move, invested resources into these enemy camps. Why, for instance, did Camp Swift boast libraries filled with over 1,200 volumes, or offer language classes to men deemed adversaries? It was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift from pure detention to something more. Captain Elias Vance, the camp adjutant, meticulously maintained his leather-bound ledger, every entry reflecting his drive to uphold order and adhere strictly to the Geneva Convention. His daily tightrope walk involved balancing military protocol with the sheer logistical and humanitarian demands of managing thousands of men, often with local resources stretched thin. The quiet rustle of paper as he reviewed reports painted a picture of calculated efficiency. Meanwhile, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the captain's wife and a local Red Cross liaison, often brought her slightly dog-eared cookbook to the camp, motivated by a quiet patriotism and a nascent curiosity about the men behind the enemy uniform. Her presence, a soft counterpoint to the camp's military precision, hinted at a different kind of exchange. It was in these small, everyday interactions, the flicker of a shared smile over a recipe, or the hushed conversations during a language lesson, that the lines between enemy and human began to blur. What unspoken agreements allowed for these moments of unexpected connection, and how did they serve a larger, unseen purpose beyond simple compassion? The answer, it turned out, lay not just in personal kindness, but in a calculated strategy, subtle as the shifting desert sands. In the quiet hum of Camp Swift, far from the battlefields, the War Department had invested in more than just barbed wire. They established libraries, stocked with over 1,200 volumes, a surprisingly robust collection for a prisoner of war camp. Imagine the soft rustle of pages, the low murmur of men learning English from textbooks, their fingers tracing unfamiliar letters. These weren't just distractions. They were conduits. Dr. Lena Petrova, the military psychologist, meticulously recorded these observations into her small, unobtrusive dictaphone at Fort Hunt, later transferring her work to larger camps. She noted the intellectual engagement, the subtle shifts in morale. Her mission, a tightrope walk between therapeutic care and intelligence gathering, saw these programs as vital. They fostered a sense of normalcy, yes, but also opened channels for insight. Private Giancarlo Rossi, whose hands were more accustomed to the rough bark of olive trees than the smooth spine of a book, found himself drawn to these classes. The opportunity to learn a new language, to read American newspapers, offered a strange window into a world so different from the one he'd left behind. It was a peculiar comfort, a stable routine contrasting sharply with the devastating letters from home, describing a crumbling Italy. How could the relative abundance of Camp Swift coexist with such profound ruin? This internal conflict, a quiet hum beneath the surface, was a shared burden. The daily routines at Camp Swift subtly challenged preconceived notions, moving beyond simple provisions. Beyond the books and lessons, an unofficial network of exchange began to flourish. A guard might swap a regional American recipe for an Italian one, or share snippets of local news that hadn't passed through official channels. These were the true, unspoken agreements, small human gestures that chipped away at the rigid definitions of wartime. It was during one of these informal exchanges that a request emerged from Giancarlo's unit, not for more food or better clothing, but for gardening tools. A peculiar request, ostensibly to beautify their barracks, but one that would soon bloom into something far more significant, an unexpected testament to cooperation within the very heart of captivity. What could a simple request for shovels and seeds possibly signify in the grand scheme of a global war? The peculiar request for gardening tools, initially dismissed by some as a whimsical attempt to soften captivity, was in fact a subtle yet profound turning point. It wasn't just about beautifying barracks. It was about planting something far deeper into the dry Texas soil. Captain Elias Vance, ever the meticulous record keeper, noted the request in his leather-bound ledger on April 14, 1943, under Camp Improvement Initiatives. He approved a small allocation of shovels, rakes, and seeds, seeing it as a low-risk way to engage the prisoners and perhaps mitigate unrest. What he likely didn't fully grasp was the quiet revolution he had just authorized. Within days, patches of barren earth near Barrack C7 began to stir. The ground, sun-baked and stubborn, resisted the first efforts, the metallic clank of shovels against rock echoing under the vast clear sky. But for men like Private Giancarlo Rossi, whose hands knew the rich soil of Tuscany, this was a familiar dance. He felt the rough wooden handle of the shovel, the cool resistance of the earth as he turned it over, and a faint, almost forgotten scent of damp soil rose to meet him. It was a fragment of home, miles from his olive groves, yet profoundly grounding. Why would the American military, focused on winning a war, allow enemy prisoners to cultivate gardens within their own camp? The answer lay not just in humanitarian gestures, but in a calculated strategy. These nascent gardens, initially small plots of beans and tomatoes, quickly became more than just a source of fresh produce. They were a visible testament to a degree of cooperation, an unspoken agreement that transcended the barbed wire. As the first green shoots tentatively pushed through the brown earth, a new rhythm took hold in Camp Swift. The quiet chatter among the Italian prisoners as they worked, the shared knowledge of cultivation, began to subtly reshape their daily lives. It gave them purpose beyond the structured lessons and the Red Cross books. This wasn't merely about growing vegetables. It was about cultivating something far more valuable. What would happen when these small plots began to yield more than just food? When their productivity caught the attention of those beyond the camp's fences? The small plots, initially a quiet act of defiance, soon became a tangible asset. Under the harsh Texas sun, the verdant rows of tomatoes, beans, and zucchini yielded far more than just sustenance for the prisoners. By late summer of 1943, Camp Swift's impromptu gardens produced a significant surplus. This wasn't merely a triumph for Giancarlo Rossi and his fellow farmers. It caught the eye of Captain Elias Vance. His meticulously kept ledger entries began reflecting unexpected gains, a clear reduction in reliance on external food supplies, a detail resonating far beyond the camp's fences. This unexpected bounty, however, wasn't just a happy accident. It tapped into a larger, calculated strategy unfolding across various POW camps. The War Department, receiving reports from facilities like Crystal City, where Italian POWs showed remarkable productivity, saw its potential. Two barrack-like structures at Camp Swift, for instance, were swiftly converted into an infirmary, staffed largely by the prisoners themselves, a testament to this burgeoning cooperation. The faint aroma of antiseptic now mingled with the scent of freshly turned earth, a strange blend of wartime necessity and an almost domestic normalcy. The implications were profound. These agricultural endeavors, initially seen as morale boosters, quickly evolved. They became a crucial, if controversial, labor source for local Texan farms facing severe wartime shortages. Italian prisoners, under guard, worked alongside American farmhands, their shared sweat blurring lines. Over 37 telegrams in a single month crisscrossed between Washington, D.C. and Camp Swift, debating the optimal balance between security protocols and maximizing this newfound productivity. This constant push and pull, the ethical tightrope walked by Captain Vance, reflected growing tension. Local newspapers, like the Bastrop Advertiser, weren't silent either. Editorials occasionally surfaced, debating the fairness of utilizing enemy labor, creating a localized tension that pitted patriotism against economic need. While the public wrestled with these visible paradoxes, deeper currents moved unseen. Why did the War Department invest in libraries with over 1,200 volumes and offer language classes to men deemed enemies of the state? It wasn't purely humanitarian. If you find these hidden layers of history fascinating, consider subscribing to Whispers from WW2. We delve into untold stories that reshape our understanding of the past. These programs, from gardens to education, were quietly yielding more than just food or knowledge. they were generating something far more strategic. What specific, intelligence-driven objectives were being achieved through these seemingly benign gestures? And how would these experiences complicate the lives of these men long after the war's end? The answer lay not in simple charity, but in a sophisticated wartime gambit, carefully orchestrated far from the public eye. While local papers debated the morality of enemy labor, military intelligence reports quietly circulating between Fort Hunt, Virginia, and the War Department in Washington, D.C., painted a clearer picture. These documents, often stamped restricted, revealed that the seemingly benign gestures, the libraries, the language classes, even the gardens, were yielding far more than just food or knowledge. They were generating something strategic, actionable intelligence, and a powerful, silent propaganda tool. Consider Dr. Lena Petrova, a military psychologist whose small, unobtrusive dictaphone hummed softly in a secluded office at Fort Hunt, later transferred to a larger camp. Her mission was delicate, perched on an ethical razor's edge. While providing therapeutic care, her primary directive was to understand the psychological impact of captivity, yes, but also to identify potential intelligence sources. She listened intently as prisoners spoke of their home villages, their units, the frustrations of the Italian front. Details that, when cross-referenced, built a mosaic of enemy capabilities and morale. The warmth of the office, a stark contrast to the barren barracks, often loosened tongues, revealing insights impossible to extract under duress. Better conditions, it was found, bred trust, or at least a pragmatic cooperation. Educational opportunities and a degree of cultural exchange didn't just pass the time. They subtly influenced the prisoners. These experiences, detailed in Petrova's precise observations and intelligence summaries, were designed to influence future surrenders on the European front. Imagine an Italian soldier, starved and weary, hearing rumors from newly captured comrades about the relative comfort of American POW camps, the regular meals, the chance to learn English. This was a powerful, unspoken message, often contrasting sharply with the harsh realities depicted in official bulletins. A quiet whisper across the battlefields. The impact wasn't limited to intelligence. The request from Giancarlo Rossi's unit for gardening tools, initially a small, quiet act to beautify their barracks at Camp Swift, soon bloomed into something far more significant. This led to large-scale agricultural projects, with POWs providing crucial labor on Texan farms. The dry, fertile soil yielded not only crops, but also a solution to wartime labor shortages, directly impacting local economies. Over 37 telegrams in a single month exchanged between Washington and Camp Swift debated the optimal balance between security and productivity, reflecting the constant push and pull of ethical considerations. These men, once deemed enemies, were now integral to the American home front, a paradox that would complicate their lives long after the war's end, forcing them to reconcile the memory of American hamburgers with the prospect of Italian ruin. But how did this calculated strategy impact the American public's perception of the war, and what unexpected bonds formed within the barbed wire? Yet, this calculated strategy, while easing labor shortages, stirred a quiet unease back home. The paradox of enemy soldiers tending American fields was not lost on the local populace. The Bastrop Advertiser, a small-town paper whose ink often smelled faintly of pine resin, ran several editorials during the mid-war years, debating the fairness of using enemy labor. One particular piece from August 1943, titled "Enemies in Our Fields," highlighted the delicate balance between wartime patriotism and the sheer economic necessity of keeping farms productive, reflecting a localized tension that pulsed just beneath the surface of daily life. The sight of Italian POWs, their uniforms distinct against the dusty Texas landscape. Working alongside American farmers was a visual that challenged many preconceived notions, creating a palpable dissonance in the public mind. Beyond the fields, within the camps, subtle human connections began to form, almost imperceptibly, like the slow bloom of a desert flower. Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the Red Cross liaison, found her slightly dog-eared cookbook becoming a bridge. She often shared simple recipes with the Italian prisoners, a quiet exchange over the fence where the scent of baking bread would sometimes drift from the camp kitchen, a stark contrast to the distant rumble of military convoys. These weren't formal intelligence operations, but moments of shared humanity. A report from Captain Vance to the War Department in October 1944 noted an increasing number of informal culinary exchanges between guards and prisoners, fostering a peculiar sense of stability within the barbed wire. The guards, many of them young men from neighboring towns, found themselves sharing stories, even Italian phrases, with men they were sworn to guard. If these quiet revelations about shared humanity and unexpected cooperation, even amidst the rigid structures of war, offer you a new lens through which to view history, consider giving this video a like. It helps us bring more of these untold stories to light. These interactions, though small, started to reshape perspectives on both sides. Private Rossi, for instance, learned to fix a broken tractor engine from a guard who once ran a garage in Waco, a practical skill that resonated deeply with his farming background. But as these bonds strengthened, a more profound question emerged. What would happen when the war finally ended, and these men, having found a semblance of stability and even a new skill set in the United States, faced the profound ambivalence of returning to a shattered homeland? These new skills, like Rossi's tractor repair, became a double-edged sword. While invaluable for rebuilding, they also sharpened the dilemma for thousands of Italian prisoners. How could they return to a homeland devastated by war when American internment had paradoxically offered stability, skill development, and even a strange form of prosperity? The initial laughter at the American hamburger, then the surprised enjoyment of its taste, was a microcosm of this profound reorientation. The relative comfort, the libraries, the language classes, they weren't just acts of pure humanitarianism, they were a calculated gambit. Military intelligence reports confirmed these conditions yielded not only strategic information, but also subtly reshaped perspectives, making future surrenders more likely. It was a strategy that blurred the lines between enemy and human, leaving an indelible mark on individuals and the war's legacy. The paradox, then, made a chilling kind of sense, a tactical generosity that inadvertently fostered a human connection, leaving men like Rossi forever changed, carrying the taste of an American hamburger and the memory of unexpected kindness back to a country they barely recognized. What untold stories of unexpected connections from history resonate most with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and for more forgotten echoes of the past, consider subscribing to Whispers from WW2.